The bobcat's amber eyes pierced through the car window, meeting Emma Reynolds' gaze in a frozen moment of time. Not the typical ferocity of a predator, not the natural fear of humans, but something rare in the wild world, a wordless plea for help. The female bobcat, weighing only about 12 to 13 pounds instead of the normal 20-25 pounds for the species, stood trembling beside Emma's car. The gray-brown fur with characteristic black spots of the Lynx rufus species was now ragged, lacking its natural glossy appearance. Ribs and hip bones protruded visibly beneath the skin, signs of severe malnutrition. In her mouth was a bobcat kitten, about 4 to 5 weeks old, eyes open but frame gaunt, weighing only half of what was normal for healthy development. The dashboard clock showed 6:42 a.m., outside temperature 48 degrees. The parking lot at Pinecrest Nature Park was deserted, with only Emma's 2017 Toyota Corolla parked near the entrance to the Aspen Loop Trail. The mother bobcat approached the car with unsteady steps. Her body shuddered in waves, not from cold, but from neurological damage, a typical symptom of secondary poisoning from anticoagulant rodenticide. With a painfully slow movement, she placed her kitten on the window ledge of the car, then used her nose to gently push it against the glass. Her pupils were abnormally dilated, another sign of poisoning. Emma, a 28-year-old elementary school teacher with her brown hair tied back in a neat ponytail, immediately recognized the abnormality of this behavior. Bobcats are extremely wary of humans, typically maintaining a safe distance of at least 50 yards. For a mother bobcat to actively approach a human, especially with her young, was behavior almost never documented in studies of the species. Emma's phone showed just 2 bars of signal, weak but enough to make a call. She found the number for the Pinecrest Wildlife Rescue Center in her contacts. One of the numbers she had saved from a field trip with her students 3 months earlier. As Emma's slightly trembling hand dialed the number, the mother bobcat suddenly swayed. A strong seizure ran through her gaunt frame, a sign of internal bleeding from loss of blood clotting ability, the main complication of rodenticide poisoning. Her front legs buckled and she collapsed to the ground right next to the front tire. The bobcat kitten remained on the window ledge, emitting a high-pitched, weak cry, barely audible through the glass. Emma quickly called the rescue center, describing the situation and her exact location. After ending the call, she looked back at the bobcat kitten still on the window ledge. Its thin fur was insufficient to keep it warm in the chilly morning air. The normal body temperature for a bobcat kitten should be maintained at 101-102 degrees, and in these conditions, the risk of hypothermia was extremely high. Its fur still carried the faint spots of a newborn bobcat, not yet fully developed into the distinctive stripes and spots of the adult species. Emma couldn't just sit and wait. Her biological clock told her that the bobcat kitten couldn't endure much longer in these conditions. She took off her thick blue wool coat made of merino wool, a material that retains heat effectively even when damp. After observing the mother bobcat and determining that she no longer had the ability to react quickly, Emma slowly cracked open the car door. The cold morning air rushed in, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. The bobcat kitten didn't react when Emma gently draped her coat over it. The small creature's body temperature felt alarmingly low through the fabric, a sign of hypothermia, a life-threatening condition for such a young animal. Emma carefully wrapped it up, making sure not to constrict its breathing, and placed it in a textbook box on the passenger seat. Then her eyes turned to the mother bobcat. With basic knowledge of wildlife from field trips with her students, Emma knew that approaching an adult bobcat was extremely dangerous. Even when injured or sick, defensive instincts could cause it to attack with sharp claws and fangs. But this bobcat had put her trust in humans, and Emma couldn't betray that trust. She took a waterproof polyester picnic blanket from her trunk, something she often used for outings with her students. Keeping a safe distance of 6-7 feet, Emma gently tossed the blanket over the trembling form of the mother bobcat. The animal didn't react, a sign of its critical condition. The sound of a car engine broke the tense morning silence. A white Ford Transit with the green logo of the Pinecrest Wildlife Rescue Center appeared, parking about 10 yards from Emma's car. Two people in khaki uniforms quickly exited the vehicle, carrying specialized equipment, special transport cages, thick protective gloves, and an emergency medical kit. Mark Sullivan, a wildlife rescue specialist around 40 years old, and Diane Winters, a veterinarian, quickly approached Emma. After confirming the location of the two bobcats, they immediately began working with the professionalism of people who had handled hundreds of similar cases. Diane approached the mother bobcat wearing Kevlar bite-resistant gloves, carefully lifting a corner of the blanket to assess the situation. After a quick check of the vital signs, she determined this was a case of end-stage anticoagulant rodenticide poisoning. Internal bleeding, neurological damage, low body temperature, all signs of an animal that had consumed many poisoned rodents over several weeks. Mark examined the bobcat kitten and noted that it was severely malnourished and dehydrated, but showed no clear signs of poisoning. At 4 and 5 weeks old, it was still completely dependent on its mother. While Diane injected vitamin K1 and established a temporary intravenous line for the mother bobcat, Mark explained the situation to Emma. Second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides, like bromediolone and brodifacoum, were causing a silent ecological disaster. They were designed to accumulate in the bodies of prey animals, and when predators like bobcats consumed multiple poisoned rodents, they received a lethal cumulative dose. Bobcats were particularly susceptible because they lacked the liver enzymes necessary to break down the toxins. The survival rate for the mother was only about 30% in this condition, but the center had previously saved cases that seemed hopeless. The kitten had a better chance, around 70%, but would face significant challenges without its mother's care. Diane completed the initial stabilization measures for the mother bobcat. They carefully lifted the mother bobcat, now placed on a rigid stretcher, and moved her into the special transport cage in the van. The kitten was placed in a separate small insulated box with a warm water bottle wrapped in a towel to maintain its temperature. Mark invited Emma to come to the center to provide more detailed information and follow the condition of the two bobcats. The clock showed 7:08 a.m., more than an hour before Emma's first class began. Without a moment's hesitation, she decided to follow them to the center, knowing she couldn't focus on teaching without knowing the fate of the bobcat mother and her kitten. As the van drove away, Emma stood for a moment beside her car, looking at the small bloodstain left on the ground, a trace of a strange moment when the boundary between humans and wildlife had temporarily dissolved, when a wild creature had placed its last trust in human hands. The Pinecrest Wildlife Rescue Center was nestled in a pine forest about 7 miles from town, a low brown building with a pointed roof hidden under the tree canopy designed to blend with the surrounding environment, minimizing stress for the wild animals being treated there. Emma parked her car next to the main building, watching as Mark and Diane quickly took the two bobcats through a door marked "Emergency Treatment Areas, all medical staff only." A young woman in a green uniform greeted Emma at the main entrance, introducing herself as Sarah, the volunteer coordinator for the center. She led Emma to a small waiting room with wooden chairs and photographs of successfully rescued wildlife on the walls. 15 minutes passed, feeling like a century. Emma sat motionless, holding a cup of herbal tea that Sarah had brought, but not drinking it. Her mind kept returning to the image of the mother bobcat's eyes that would stay with her for the rest of her life. How could a wild creature overcome all natural instincts, all innate fears to seek human help in a moment of desperation? The waiting room door opened. Diane Winters entered, having removed her gloves and protective coat. Her expression was still serious, but no longer as tense as before. Diane sat down across from Emma. The mother bobcat had been stabilized but remained in critical condition. They had performed an emergency blood transfusion to compensate for blood loss from internal bleeding. Vitamin K1 had been administered at a high dose to restore blood clotting ability. Blood tests confirmed this was secondary poisoning from Brodifacoum, one of the strongest and most persistent rodenticides on the market. The Bobcat kitten was responding better to treatment. It was dehydrated and malnourished, but showed no signs of poisoning. It had been fed a special nutritional mixture through a syringe and placed in a temperature-controlled incubator. Mark Sullivan, having just finished a phone call, entered the waiting room. In his hands was a thick folder of documents. Over the past 10 years, the center had recorded an alarming increase in cases of wildlife suffering from secondary rodenticide poisoning, especially in areas bordering urban environments and natural habitats. Bobcats, coyotes, owls, eagles, all victims of a chemical war aimed at rodents but affecting the entire food chain. Emma listened, her heart aching. She understood that the mother bobcat, in her effort to hunt and feed her young, had unwittingly consumed mice carrying deadly toxins, too high a price for survival instinct and maternal love. Mark led Emma to a small observation window where she could look into the special care room. The mother bobcat lay on a warm pad surrounded by monitoring equipment. An intravenous line was attached to her front leg. Her ragged fur had been cleaned, revealing more clearly her emaciated frame. Though lightly sedated, her eyes occasionally opened, cloudy and distant. In a nearby warming cage, the bobcat kitten curled up on a soft cushion, its small body rising and falling with steady breaths. It had been fed and appeared more stable, but it was still too early to confirm it would pull through. Mark explained that the next 48 hours would be critical for the mother bobcat. If she could get through this dangerous period, her chances of recovery would increase significantly. The kitten needed to be fed every 2 hours for the next few days, a major challenge for the center's already overworked staff. Emma looked at the clock, 7:45 a.m. She needed to get to school, but before leaving, she asked Mark if there was anything she could do to help. Mark smiled, perhaps not surprised by the question. The center always needed volunteers, especially people with patience and gentleness like Emma. He gave her a volunteer application form and promised to update her on the condition of the 2 bobcats. Emma's third-grade students immediately noticed their teacher's distraction during class that day. Usually energetic and enthusiastic, today Emma seemed to frequently look out the window, her mind somewhere far away. When the children asked what was wrong, Emma decided to share a simplified version of the story, about a mother in nature who had done something extraordinary to save her child. The round eyes of the children listened attentively. The story of the mother bobcat seeking human help touched their young hearts. What began as a simple lesson about wildlife gradually turned into a deeper discussion about human responsibility toward the environment and the creatures that share our living space. Immediately after school, Emma drove back to the rescue center. She had signed the volunteer form and received a quick orientation from Sarah about basic procedures. Emma's role would be to help prepare food and clean up, not directly interact with wildlife, a strict rule to ensure they didn't become accustomed to human scent and presence. Diane greeted Emma with cautiously optimistic news. The mother bobcat had survived the first night, a positive sign. Blood tests showed the vitamin K1 was working, gradually improving blood clotting ability. The bobcat kitten was responding well to the special diet, even beginning to show some natural behaviors for its species. From the observation window, Emma watched the mother bobcat. She still lay weakly, but her eyes were more alert, occasionally scanning the room, perhaps searching for her missing kitten. The medical staff had decided to keep the 2 separated during the initial treatment phase, but placed them close enough to sense each other's scent, an important method to maintain their natural bond. For the next 3 days, Emma spent every spare moment at the rescue center. Mornings before school, afternoons after teaching, and entire weekend days. She learned to prepare special food for different animals, clean care areas, and assist with administrative work. Through the observation window, she witnessed the daily recovery of the two bobcats. On the fourth day, a major breakthrough. The mother bobcat was strong enough to eat voluntarily, a small piece of fresh chicken placed near her head. Diane described this as an extremely positive sign, indicating the digestive system was beginning to function again. The kitten was becoming more active, even starting to play with special toys designed to stimulate natural hunting instincts. On the fifth day, an important decision was made to reunite mother and kitten. This process required extreme care. The mother bobcat, though recovering, might still reject her kitten if its scent had changed too much from human contact. Mark and Diane prepared a larger recovery room, equipped with observation cameras and a hiding area for the kitten if needed. Emma was allowed to observe this process through a video monitor. The bobcat kitten was placed in the recovery room first, then the mother was brought in afterward. A tense moment as the mother slowly raised her head, recognizing the familiar scent of her offspring. She tried to stand up, her body still weak but driven by maternal instinct. The kitten emitted a small cry, wobbling toward its mother. No one in the observation room dared to breathe deeply. This was the decisive moment. If the mother rejected the kitten, the entire recovery process and reintegration into nature would face enormous challenges. The mother bobcat stood motionless for a moment, head slightly tilted, nose sniffing the air. Then, with a slow movement, she approached her kitten. Their noses touched, the characteristic identification ritual of felines. The kitten nuzzled into its mother's neck, its small cry full of joy. The mother began licking the kitten's head and back, removing strange scents, replacing them with her own familiar scent. A sigh of relief echoed in the observation room. The two had recognized each other. The bond remained intact. In the following days, both continued to recover at an amazing rate. The mother gradually regained her strength, beginning to move more within the recovery area, her eyes slowly regaining their natural wariness. The kitten developed rapidly, its weight increasing steadily, its fur gradually showing the distinctive spotted pattern of the species. Under its mother's guidance, it began practicing basic hunting skills with specially provided toys. 2 weeks after the fateful day in the parking lot, Mark informed Emma of good news. The two bobcats were healthy enough to be moved to the outdoor recovery area, the final step before returning to the wild. This area was a large enclosure built in the forest, simulating a natural environment with trees, rocks, and even live small prey like field mice. Here, the two would gradually regain their wild instincts and minimize contact with humans. Emma wasn't permitted near this area, but Mark showed her images from hidden surveillance cameras. The mother bobcat had fully regained her cautious instinct, moving carefully, frequently checking surroundings, and teaching her kitten sophisticated hunting skills. Her fur had regained its natural glossy appearance, her frame no longer gaunt. The kitten was becoming increasingly agile, learning from its mother how to hunt, hide, and be wary of danger. A month after that fateful day, Mark announced it was time to release the two back into the wild. Final tests showed the mother bobcat had fully recovered from the poisoning, and the kitten had developed all the necessary skills to survive in nature. They would be released in an area near where Emma had found them, a forested area far from residential zones, with plenty of natural prey and minimal risk from human activity. The release took place at dawn, a time when bobcats are typically active. Emma was invited to attend, a rare privilege for a volunteer. She took the morning off from teaching, knowing this was a moment she couldn't miss. The chosen location was a small valley in the Blue Ridge Nature Reserve, about 5 miles north of where Emma had found the two, far enough to avoid areas that might be contaminated with rodenticide, but still within the natural territory of an adult female bobcat. The cool June morning, pale golden sunlight just appearing over the eastern mountains. Morning dew still clung to each blade of grass, sparkling like thousands of tiny diamonds. Emma stood at a distance, watching Mark and Diane carefully transport the special cage from the van to the chosen spot. A sparse area at the forest edge, close enough to potential shelter, but still open enough for them to observe from a safe distance. From her position, Emma could see the two bobcats in the cage. The mother stood upright, alert, ears perked, nose constantly testing the new air. This was no longer the desperate, weakened creature Emma had met a month ago. Instead, it was a perfect natural predator, strong and highly alert. The kitten stood close to its mother, no longer the small, gaunt creature, but now a sturdy young bobcat with healthy fur and sharp eyes. Mark carefully placed the cage on the ground, facing toward the deep forest. He checked the remote opening mechanism, a rope extended to a hiding spot about 30 yards away. After ensuring everything was ready, he signaled for everyone to retreat to a safe position. Emma, Mark, Diane, and 2 other volunteers hid behind large bushes. No one spoke a word, only the sound of a gentle breeze through the branches and forest birds welcoming the new dawn. Mark slowly pulled the rope. The cage door slid up, opening the path to freedom. Nothing happened for the first few seconds. The mother bobcat stood motionless, assessing the situation, checking for any potential danger signs. Then, with lightning speed, she darted out of the cage, stopping a few meters away, turning her head back to look. The kitten followed, moving quickly, but maintaining a safe distance from its mother. The two paused at the forest edge, as if evaluating the new environment. The mother constantly sniffed, ears perked to catch every sound. The kitten mimicked its mother, learning how to assess the environment from its natural guide. Then, a moment, none of the observers dared believe their eyes. The mother bobcat turned her head back, looking directly toward where they were hiding. Though distant and concealed, there was no way she could see them, but the sharp eyes of this apex predator seemed to penetrate through every layer of camouflage. She stared for a few seconds, then, unbelievably, gave a slight nod, a gesture almost imperceptible if not watching carefully. Emma felt tears welling up. In that moment, she believed the bobcat had recognized her, the person who had answered its desperate plea for help. It wasn't a hostile or fearful look, but one of acknowledgement and perhaps, in some way, gratitude. After that, as if a decision had been made, the mother bobcat turned toward the deep forest. With a powerful leap, she disappeared into the shadows of the tall pine trees. The kitten followed, and in an instant, both had blended into their natural environment as if they had never left. No one in the observation group said a word. They stood there in the quiet space of early morning, witnessing one of those rare moments when humans are allowed a glimpse into the truly wild world, not through zoo bars or camera lenses, but in the complete freedom of nature. Mark broke the silence. In 20 years doing this work, I've never seen anything like it. Diane nodded, her voice hoarse with emotion, looking into the mother's eyes when she turned back, as if she understood everything. Emma said nothing. No words could express the emotion surging through her at this moment. A month ago, a desperate wild creature had placed its last trust in her, a human, its natural enemy. And today, that trust had been repaid with freedom. As she drove home, Emma thought about the fragile boundary between the human world and the wild world. Most of the time, we live in separate spaces, rarely truly meeting. But sometimes, in rare and precious moments, that boundary dissolves and we have a chance to truly see each other, not as enemies or strangers, but as creatures sharing the same planet, with the same longing for survival and protection of loved ones. That was the day a mother bobcat placed her last trust in human hands. And it was the day Emma understood that compassion is not the exclusive privilege of humans, but an invisible thread connecting all of us in the vast web of life.